So my name is Tom Perkins. I'm a 27-year-old freelance writer and publisher. I've just published my first travel cookbook called Spices and Spandex, based on a 501-day journey from Weald, a little village in southern England, all the way down to South Africa, to Cape Town. It took 501 days through 26 different countries, travelling over 20,000 kilometres. So my inspiration, I have a real love for discovery and exploration, and I wanted to combine all of my passions, so it's photography, film, travel and cooking. And I wanted to do a trip that was from one local pub to another. I told it to one of my mates, and he kind of really liked the idea, and then it just snowballed from this tiny little seed of a conception into what it became. And we wanted to travel in a way that was intimate and vulnerable and exposing, and so we decided to go on bicycles because we wanted this sense of interaction with everyone that we came through, and the bicycle promotes that in a way that no other mode of transport does. And so it was kind of a real grassroots trip that we wanted to plan, and luckily we were able to do that. And the first thing that every single person offered us was food and drink. So food is this thing which is incredibly kind of levelling. And an amazing facilitator of conversation and interaction, and that's what we wanted. This whole trip was about people, about meeting people and sharing stories, and through a collective meal and through food and its preparation, its consumption, this was the best way for us to start these conversations that we were so after.
They were just going to set off and pedal. His early experience of food would have been homegrown vegetables and mummy cooking the food. So I think he's become a much more adventurous cook than I ever was, and I'm now trying to step up a bit and be a bit more adventurous myself.
Yeah, a journey that takes 501 days is a real process. It has huge fluctuations for good and bad. There were plenty of things that went very wrong and very testing, trying times. But within that 501 days, there were also just sort of countless highlights. I mean, I can't put a finger on the amount of times that I just inexplicably had this enormous smile on my face. And that happened every single day, and its frequency, it was so genuinely assured that once a day you would just be amazed at something you came across. So I think one of my favourite cooking experiences of all time was cooking with this wonderful girl called Robista, who in the foothills of Mount Kenya taught us this amazing dish of chapatis, which is a very staple dish for most Kenyans. And she cooked it over this open fire, and then we made this filling. But I said to her, listen, Robista, what is your favourite dish growing up? And she goes, well, my favourite dish is chapatis, because I was a big tomboy when I was growing up. So that whole idea of chatting to locals and finding out what dish means a lot to them, or what is a childhood favourite dish, or what is a national dish, or what they cook for their family, and then getting them to teach us and then us to replicate it in the book is something that is kind of the premise of the book, is this sort of learning and then sharing.
I was working at the vineyard on a Friday evening, and I got a Skype call from Tom, who had got into Cairo and his knee was no longer willing to play ball. And he said, how do you fancy joining us on this trip? And it was a pretty easy decision, seeing as he was only going to be doing this trip once. And on Monday morning I find myself in the middle of Luxor, which is halfway down Egypt. I was with them for about 3.5, 4 weeks. My knee then actually gave me a bit of jip. I was in a place called Dongola, and I remember calling back home to my dad, who said, oh, I didn't tell you boys, I always had problems with my knees as a youngster. Anyhow, I then went down to Khartoum and met up with Tom and had a fabulous week with him down there.
And so the highlights were just finding the extraordinary in the very ordinary moments and the day-to-day things which you can't plan before a trip like this. You can't plan running into a local down a back street and that person, inviting you to stay for a month like I did in Khartoum with the Sudanese family. Like, the little things were the actual things that you really take out of trips like this. So I could say an overall highlight was, I don't know, seeing the pyramids or seeing the Great Nile or whatever it was, but the actualities are that in trips like these, the actual worth and merit of the trips are made up by the sum of tiny little individual parts. And it's when you collate them all that you get the real highlight, which is just this privileged exposure to a side of the world which you wouldn't maybe have seen if you were travelling in any other way than a bicycle. It was just the goodness of complete strangers was probably the ultimate highlight.